What happens when a powerful billionaire, used to being alone, meets a single mother with a heart full of courage? At a wedding filled with laughter and glamour, two lonely souls cross paths. One question changes everything. Will you be my date? This is not just a love story, it's a heart-melting journey of kindness, second chances, and discovering that true love doesn't care about wealth, status, or appearances. It cares only about the heart. Stay with us as we unfold a story that will touch your soul and leave you believing in love again. The chandeliers glittered like 1,000 captured stars, their glow bathing the wedding hall in golden light. Music drifted through the air, soft violins carrying love songs that made couples lean closer to each other. The floor was alive with laughter, swirling dresses, and the clinking of champagne glasses. Everywhere people celebrated, except in one corner. There, in the shadows where the light only half reached, sat Alexander Reed, the billionaire CEO everyone admired, but no one truly knew. His black suit was tailored to perfection, his hair brushed neatly, his jaw strong and sharp. He looked like a man who could command a room with a single word. But tonight the room barely acknowledged him. The wheelchair beneath him wasn't just metal and leather, it was a wall that separated him from everyone else. People glanced at him, some with quick pity, others with awkward hesitation. Whispers traveled like quiet winds. That's Alexander Reed. Such a tragedy after the accident. But no one dared to approach. Alexander kept his eyes fixed on the glowing dance floor, as if the twirling bridesmaids and laughing groomsmen could distract him from the ache inside. Once he would have been at the very center of such joy, tall and confident, leading the dance with a woman on his arm. Now he was a silent observer, invited, respected, yet utterly alone. He lifted his glass slowly, though he hadn't taken a sip in an hour. The bubbles rose to the surface, mocking him with their careless joy. The sound of laughter nearby cut into him deeper than any knife. Do they see me as less of a man now? He thought. Do they only remember the chair and not the man who built an empire with his mind? The truth weighed heavy. He had spent years building companies, earning billions, becoming one of the most powerful names in the business world. But power couldn't change how people looked at him now. They admired his money but feared his brokenness. One couple passed near his table. The woman gave him a sympathetic smile, then quickly turned away, tugging her partner along. Alexander's heart clenched. He hated pity more than pain. He adjusted his cufflinks, pretending he didn't notice, pretending he wasn't wounded by the silence that surrounded him. But deep down he felt invisible, and invisibility was worse than loneliness. His eyes shifted to the bride and groom, glowing with happiness at the center of it all. The bride in her white gown looked radiant. The groom couldn't stop staring at her. Alexander's chest tightened, not from jealousy, but from longing. He wanted that. He wanted to be seen, to be chosen, to be loved despite the chair, despite the scars. Yet tonight it seemed impossible. The more the hall glowed, the darker his corner felt. Every cheer, every toast, every dance felt like a reminder of what he had lost. And though hundreds of people surrounded him, Alexander Reed had never felt more alone. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that before the night ended, a stranger would shatter his loneliness with 6 words that would change his life forever. Will you be my date tonight? The wedding doors swung open with a soft creak, and into the glittering hall stepped Clara Hayes, her hand firmly holding the small, delicate fingers of her daughter. She was 29, young, but with the quiet strength of a woman who had faced storms and survived. She wasn't adorned in diamonds or wrapped in silk. Her dress was a soft shade of blue, simple but graceful, hugging her slender figure in a way that carried elegance without effort. It wasn't the dress of a wealthy guest, but it was pressed neatly, and her every step carried dignity. The chandelier light fell upon her hair, a golden-brown cascade that shimmered softly. For a moment she looked almost out of place among the jeweled gowns and glittering suits. Yet something about her, the way she walked with her chin lifted, the way her hand tightened protectively around her daughter's, made her unforgettable. Beside her skipped Emily, just 6 years old, her tiny shoes clicking lightly against the marble floor. Her white dress swayed with each step, and her big blue eyes studied everything with innocent wonder. Clara had not wanted to come tonight. Her life was busy enough, working mornings in the bakery, rushing to school pickups, struggling to balance bills while giving Emily every ounce of love she could. Weddings were for fairy tales, for couples who had the luxury of dreaming, not for women like her who had once dreamed but been left behind. But the bride, her childhood friend, had insisted. "You must come, Clara. You were there for me when we were girls. I want you there on my happiest day." So here she was, tired, a little nervous, but smiling for Emily's sake. Emily tugged at her hand, whispering in her tiny voice, "Mom, why does everyone stare so much?" Clara smiled gently, leaning down to kiss her daughter's head. "Because you're the prettiest little girl here," she whispered back, and Emily's cheeks turned pink. They moved further into the hall, weaving between sparkling gowns and polished shoes, and then Emily froze. Her little hand pulled hard on Clara's fingers, making her stop. "Mom," Emily said again, her voice softer this time, almost like a secret. "Why is that man sitting alone?" Clara followed her daughter's gaze. Her eyes landed on a corner table where a man sat apart from the glittering crowd. He was striking, tall even as he sat, broad shoulders beneath his tailored suit, his face carved with strength and shadow. But what caught Clara wasn't his wealth or his appearance. It was his eyes. They were piercing yet distant, filled with a loneliness so raw that it cut through the sparkle of the room. He looked like someone who carried the weight of the world, yet had no one to share it with. Clara's breath caught. She didn't know him. She only recognized his face vaguely from whispers about the powerful billionaire who had once ruled boardrooms and now lived in silence. But she didn't see the billionaire. She didn't even see the wheelchair that separated him from the crowd. She saw a man abandoned by joy, sitting alone at a table meant for laughter. A man who seemed untouched by the celebration swirling around him. Something tugged at her heart, an ache that whispered, "He doesn't need pity. He needs someone to see him." Emily tilted her head, her little voice breaking the silence between them. "He looks sad, Mommy." Clara knelt to meet her daughter's eyes, brushing back a strand of her golden hair. "You're right, sweetheart," she said softly. "Sometimes even grown-ups feel very alone." Emily leaned closer, whispering like it was the biggest secret in the world. "Maybe he needs a friend." Clara's heart trembled at her daughter's innocent truth. For a long moment, she looked back at the man in the corner, watching how he tried to smile at the room but failed, and something deep inside her shifted. She had not come tonight looking for anything. Certainly not for love, not for change. But fate, she realized, had a way of arranging meetings no one expected. Clara squeezed Emily's hand a little tighter, and though she didn't know it yet, her next choice, to walk across the room toward Alexander Reed, would change both their lives forever. The music swelled louder, violins blending with the rhythm of drums as couples glided onto the dance floor. Laughter echoed through the hall, and the bride and groom moved as if the world belonged only to them. The air buzzed with joy, but in the far corner, Alexander Reed sat watching. His lips curved in what appeared to be a smile, but it was thin, fragile, almost painful. Behind that smile hid sorrow, the kind that could not be masked by wealth or charm. He looked like a man divided in two. His strong shoulders spoke of power, yet his eyes carried a loneliness that seemed unending. Every twirl of the dancers was like a knife reminding him of what he had lost. Every laugh in the room was a whisper of everything he could not reach anymore. From across the hall, Clara Hayes noticed him again. Something inside her stirred. The same ache she had felt earlier when Emily asked why he was alone. This time, though, it was stronger. Her heart began to race. Her palms grew damp. "Should I?" she asked herself. "He's a billionaire? He's untouchable? What if he thinks I'm foolish?" But then she remembered his eyes, the loneliness in them. No, he wasn't untouchable. He was human. Taking a deep breath, Clara squeezed Emily's hand and whispered, "Stay right here, sweetheart." Emily nodded, her innocent eyes watching curiously. Clara smoothed the fabric of her blue dress with trembling fingers and began walking toward him. Her steps were slow but steady, each one echoing like a drumbeat in her chest. Across the dance floor, she felt the weight of eyes following her. But she didn't stop. Finally, she stood before him. Alexander looked up, startled. For a moment, his sharp gray eyes locked onto hers, as if trying to read her soul. Clara swallowed hard. Her voice came out soft but clear, trembling with courage. "Will you be my date?" The words seemed to hang in the air, shimmering with disbelief. Alexander froze. For an instant, he thought she was mocking him. Women never asked him that anymore, not since the accident, not since the wheelchair had become part of his life. He searched her face, waiting for the pity, waiting for the insincere kindness he had grown used to. But what he found instead stunned him. Her eyes, deep, steady, and filled with honesty, looked at him as if she saw him, not the chair. His heart thudded painfully in his chest. Part of him wanted to accept instantly. Another part whispered, "Don't. She'll only walk away like the others." Before he could decide, a small figure appeared at his side. Emily, brave and innocent, climbed onto his lap without hesitation. Her little hands touched his suit, and her voice rang out like pure music. "Please dance with us, mister," she said, tilting her head and smiling with childlike courage. For the first time in years, Alexander's control cracked. A laugh burst out of him, deep, genuine, unguarded. It wasn't polished or restrained. It was real. The sound startled even himself. He couldn't remember the last time he had laughed without forcing it. And in that moment, as Clara's hopeful eyes and Emily's innocent smile surrounded him, something inside his heart broke open. The loneliness that had been chained within him began to loosen. The bitterness, the fear, the doubt. They all trembled under the warmth of a single mother and her child. And Alexander Reed, the billionaire in the wheelchair, felt something he thought he had lost forever: hope. The music rose, violins and piano weaving together into a song meant for love. Couples filled the floor, their bodies swaying gracefully under the golden chandeliers. Eyes sparkled, hands intertwined, hearts beat in rhythm. And then something unexpected. From the shadows of the corner, Alexander Reed wheeled himself forward. Clara walked beside him, her soft hand resting over his, guiding him with a quiet strength. At his other side, little Emily skipped, her laughter carrying louder than the music. People turned. Whispers fluttered like wind across the room. "Is he going to dance?" "Look, it's Alexander Reed with... Who is she?" Alexander felt the weight of every stare, every breath of judgment pressing on him. For a moment, he almost stopped. The old fear gripped his chest. "They're watching me. They're waiting for me to fail." But then Clara squeezed his hand. Just one touch, gentle yet sure. And when he looked at her, she wasn't watching the crowd. She was watching him. Her eyes didn't hold pity. They held trust, belief, something more powerful than 1,000 words. In her gaze, he wasn't a broken man in a chair. He was simply a man. He drew in a breath. "Shall we?" he whispered. Clara nodded, her smile small but radiant. On the edge of the floor, she held his hand, her thumb brushing softly across his knuckles. Emily twirled beside them, giggling as her little dress spun in circles. And in that moment, the grand wedding hall transformed. It no longer felt like a crowd of strangers watching him. It felt like family. Warmth, laughter, life, all of it surged into Alexander's chest as though he had been starved for years. Clara leaned closer, her voice barely rising over the music. "You don't need to dance like them," she whispered. "Just be here with us. That's enough." Something inside him cracked. For years, his pride had built walls around his heart, walls meant to keep him safe from hurt. But Clara's kindness was not loud or forceful. It was gentle, steady, and unstoppable. And slowly, those walls began to melt. He let himself smile, truly smile. He moved his chair in time with the music, not caring how it looked. Clara's hand held his, guiding him as if he were leading the dance himself. Emily spun and laughed, making both of them laugh with her. The whispers in the crowd didn't stop, but Clara didn't care. And for the first time, neither did Alexander. He wasn't the billionaire everyone pitied. He wasn't the CEO who had lost what once defined him. He was a man, alive, present, wanted. Every note of the song wrapped around him like a promise. Every smile from Clara reminded him of a truth he had forgotten. Love doesn't look at weakness. Love looks at the heart. As the music swelled to its peak, Clara leaned in, her lips brushing near his ear. "You're more than they'll ever understand," she whispered. Those words pierced deeper than any wound, but this time it didn't hurt. It healed. And in that single dance, half laughter, half courage, Alexander Reed felt something he thought had died forever. He felt like he belonged. The music faded behind them as Clara and Alexander slipped out into the wedding garden. The night air was gentle, carrying the faint fragrance of roses and freshly cut grass. Above them, strings of fairy lights glowed softly, draping the garden in a golden shimmer that made the world feel magical. Clara walked slowly beside his chair, her heels crunching lightly against the gravel. Neither of them spoke at first. The silence wasn't awkward, it was heavy, expectant, as though both hearts were waiting for something to break open. Finally, Alexander stopped beneath a willow tree where the lights cast a warm halo around them. Clara turned to face him, her fingers twisting nervously at the fabric of her dress. Her lips parted and her voice came out fragile, almost breaking. "There's something I need to tell you," she whispered. He nodded, his sharp gray eyes softening, inviting her to continue. She drew in a shaky breath. "When I was 21, I thought I'd found my forever. I married a man who promised me the world. But when I told him I was pregnant, he left." Her throat tightened. For years she had carried this story quietly, almost ashamed of it. But tonight, under the fairy lights, she let it out. "I raised Emily alone. I worked in a bakery, sometimes 2 shifts back to back. People whispered behind my back. Single mother, they'd say, like it was a crime. I didn't have money. I didn't have family support, but I had her." Her eyes filled with tears, but her smile was strong. "And she became my reason to keep going." Alexander's chest tightened as he listened. Every word was a dagger and a gift at once. He saw not weakness in her story, but courage. Clara looked at him, her voice trembling. "I came tonight thinking I was just another guest. But then I saw you sitting there and I thought, maybe you understand what it's like, to be surrounded by people but still feel alone." The words struck him deeply. He lowered his gaze, his hand tightening on the wheel of his chair. And then, for the first time that night, he let down his own guard. "My turn," he said softly. Clara's breath caught, waiting. He inhaled slowly, as though speaking it aloud would cost him pieces of his pride. 3 years ago, I was in a car accident. One moment I was unstoppable, the man who built empires, who was feared in boardrooms. The next, I woke up in a hospital bed, and I haven't walked since." The garden seemed to still, even the wind pausing to listen. "My business partners, they still respect my money but not my heart. They shake my hand, but I can see it in their eyes. They don't see me as a man anymore, just a crippled billionaire they can pity or exploit." His voice grew hoarse, heavy with an ache he had never shared aloud. "And the worst part? I began to believe them. I began to believe I would never be loved again." Clara's heart twisted at his confession. Without thinking, she reached for his hand, her fingers curling softly over his. "You are so wrong," she whispered fiercely. "You are more than a chair, more than money, more than what people whisper about you." Alexander looked at her, his gray eyes burning with something raw, something unspoken. For the first time in years, he felt exposed and yet safe. Their stories touched like 2 broken pieces finding a perfect fit. Her wounds, his scars, they mirrored each other, not in the same way, but in the way pain recognizes pain. And in that moment, both realized something extraordinary. For the first time in years, they weren't invisible. For the first time in years, they were seen. Weeks turned into months, and what had begun as a fragile spark at the wedding slowly grew into a flame that neither Clara nor Alexander could ignore. At first, their meetings were simple, just casual visits, just polite conversations. But soon they became moments that both of them quietly counted down to. Alexander, once known as the untouchable billionaire, now found joy in doing the simplest things, sitting at Clara's bakery, tasting her fresh bread, and watching Emily's little hands sprinkle sugar over cookies. The townspeople noticed. At first, whispers followed them, curious glances, judgmental eyes. Some sneered, saying, "Why would a billionaire sit in a small bakery?" Others mocked, "Why would a single mother believe she belonged by his side?" But neither Clara nor Alexander allowed the noise of the world to poison what they had found. Every time Alexander wheeled himself into the bakery, Emily would run toward him with open arms, shouting, "Uncle Alexander!" and cling to him as if he were already family. And every time Clara saw that smile on his face, her heart softened a little more. Alexander never tried to buy her love with diamonds or cars. Instead, he brought his time, something more precious than money. He helped Emily with her school projects, listened to Clara's late-night worries, and even learned how to roll dough with clumsy hands that had once only signed billion-dollar contracts. Clara, in turn, never saw his chair as a burden. She saw his strength, the quiet determination in his eyes, the way he refused to let life break him. She fell not for his title, but for his heart, the very heart that had once believed it was unworthy of love. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in soft shades of gold and purple, Alexander found himself sitting with Clara outside her bakery. The air was scented with fresh bread, and fairy lights twinkled gently around them. He turned to her, his voice trembling with emotion, and whispered, "You gave me back my life the night you asked me to be your date." Clara's eyes filled with tears. Her lips trembled, but her smile shone through as she replied softly, "And you gave me back hope that love still exists." In that fragile exchange of words, their wounds found healing. It wasn't about wealth, it wasn't about appearances. It was about kindness. It was about courage. It was about daring to look past scars, whether visible or hidden, and choosing love anyway. Soon, the whispers in town began to change. People saw how Alexander sat proudly in Clara's small shop, not caring who judged him. They saw how Clara stood tall beside him, never ashamed, never doubting. And slowly, what had started as gossip turned into admiration. Their story became a silent lesson, spoken not through speeches, but through the way they lived. That love is not about perfection. That worth is not measured in wealth or flawless bodies.